The roof leaked when it rained. The walls were thin enough to hear neighbors sneeze. But the Okon family's house in Oron was full of something that no poverty could drown: hope. Evelyn Okon stirred a steaming pot of beans over a smoky kerosene stove, her eyes occasionally drifting toward the doorway. The sun outside was soft and golden, almost apologetic as it set behind their compound wall. Inside, her children sat around a wooden table held together by nails and prayer. David, stop drawing football fields on your assignment, Amara said sharply, snatching the paper from him. David scowled. It's art, not nonsense. Art won't get you a job. Football will. Evelyn raised her voice from the kitchen. It won't get you dinner if you keep talking. The room stilled for a second. Then everyone laughed. Even Michael, the oldest and most serious, cracked a smile before returning to his well-worn science textbook. Joy, the youngest, hummed as she colored in a picture of their family, complete with chickens and a son. Their life was simple, hard, and uncertain, but there was laughter, and that counted for something. A few minutes later, they heard footsteps outside, heavy, tired. "Daddy's home!" Joy yelled, abandoning her crayons. She flung the door open and threw herself into Daniel's arms before he could even wipe the sweat from his brow. "My princess," he whispered, lifting her despite the fatigue weighing down his limbs. Evelyn came out, wiping her hands on her wrapper. "You look like the road beat you today." Daniel chuckled. "It tried, but I'm still standing." He dropped his faded work bag beside the door and leaned against the wall. "Where's Michael?" "Still pretending to be a doctor," Amara said, smirking. "I am going to be a doctor," Michael muttered. Daniel smiled. "And you will be, all of you will be what God has destined, once I figure out how to pay school fees next term." Evelyn's smile faded. It was a light comment, but everyone felt the truth behind it. The sawmill barely paid Daniel enough to cover food, let alone school supplies, uniforms, or rent. They were always one emergency away from collapse. That night, after the children had fallen asleep in their shared room, Evelyn sat beside Daniel on their creaky mattress, fanning herself with a folded magazine. "You didn't eat much," she said softly. "Wasn't hungry." "Something wrong?" He didn't answer right away. Then he reached for a brown envelope tucked into his bag. "I got this today." Evelyn sat up straighter. "What is it?" "I applied for a job 2 months ago. Remember my friend Etim in Lagos? The one who works in oil?" Daniel nodded. "He helped me submit my papers to a multinational company, Toglex Global. I didn't think I stood a chance, but they called me for an interview 2 weeks ago. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to get your hopes up." Evelyn's eyes widened. "And?" "I got the job." She blinked. "You? What?" "They want me in Lagos. Junior Operations Analyst. It's an entry-level position, but it's real. The pay is 5 times what I make now. And they're offering relocation support for the whole family." Evelyn clutched the magazine tighter. "Lagos? That's big, Daniel." "I know. It'll be different, expensive, crowded. But it's a chance for the children to attend better schools, for us to finally move forward." She looked away, her throat tight. "Will they accept us there?" "I don't know," he whispered. "But I can't watch our children shrink their dreams to fit this life." Evelyn nodded slowly. "Then we go." The next 2 weeks were a blur of packing, paperwork, and quiet goodbyes. Neighbors came to wish them well. Some were genuinely happy. Others hid their envy behind thin smiles. "Make sure you remember us when you start riding big cars," one joked. Daniel simply smiled and shook his hand. Deep down, he was terrified, but also ready. Their last night in Oron was quiet. The children huddled together, whispering about what Lagos might look like. Michael tried to act unbothered, but even he couldn't hide the spark in his eyes. Outside, Daniel stood barefoot on the dry earth, looking at the small house that had sheltered them through storms, hunger, and late rent. Evelyn joined him and leaned against his side. "Can you believe it?" she asked. "Sometimes I think I'm dreaming." She looked up at him. "Promise me one thing. Anything. Don't forget what this place taught us." He looked at the house one last time, then at the stars above. "I won't." The city greeted them with noise, heat, and impatience. Horns blared like alarms. Okadas swerved between buses. People moved like they were in a race no one warned the Okons about. As they squeezed into the taxi that was to take them to their temporary accommodation, David clung to Evelyn's arm. "Mommy, why is everyone shouting?" "They're not shouting," Evelyn said gently. "They're just talking fast." Joy scrunched her nose at the unfamiliar smells outside the window. "It's not like Oron." "No," Amara whispered, eyes wide. "It's not." But Daniel, sitting in the front seat, kept his gaze steady. Lagos was chaos, yes, but within it lay opportunity. And opportunity was why they had come. Their flat was in a worn-down but busy part of the mainland, Ayegunle. It had stained walls, unreliable plumbing, and the ceiling fan made more noise than it gave relief. But it was theirs, and it was safe. The next morning, Daniel woke before dawn, dressed in his only good shirt, and walked to the nearest bus stop with a folder tucked under his arm. Toglex Global's Nigerian office sat in a gated compound in Victoria Island, behind a high fence and rows of well-polished cars. Daniel's heart raced as he approached the gate. He introduced himself to the security guard, showed his employment letter, and was let in. Inside, the building was cool and spotless. People walked fast in sharp clothes, speaking English clipped and clean. Daniel felt the weight of his thrift store shoes, but he stood tall. A man with a kind face greeted him at reception. "You must be Mr. Okon." "Yes, sir." "I'm Mr. Adebayo, head of logistics. You'll be reporting to me." He offered a handshake, firm and professional. Daniel exhaled. "I'm ready to work, sir." The first week was overwhelming. Spreadsheets, software tools, reporting formats, department protocols. It was a flood of newness. But Daniel was a sponge. He stayed late. He asked questions. He took notes. He memorized procedures. "You're catching on quickly," Mr. Adebayo said by Thursday. "You got the right attitude." At night, Daniel returned home exhausted but smiling. The family gathered on the floor for dinner. Boiled yam and eggs that Evelyn had cooked on a small gas stove. "So what's it like?" Michael asked, eyes wide. Daniel wiped sweat from his brow. "It's like a different world. Quiet, clean, fast." "Did you make any friends?" Joy asked. He chuckled. "Not yet, but I'll get there." "Are we rich now?" David blurted. The room went quiet. Daniel looked at his son and smiled. "Not rich, but we've started moving." Evelyn faced her own battles in Lagos. The neighborhood was rough. Water was scarce. Prices were high. She missed the familiarity of Oron, the friendly neighbors, the wide open spaces, the quiet. The children struggled too. Their new school was crowded and competitive. Amara came home one day in tears. "They laughed at my accent." "Let them laugh," Evelyn said, holding her daughter close. "You will still finish top of your class." Michael stayed up late every night, pushing himself harder than ever. "If Dad is working this hard, then I have to too," he said once. Daniel began giving the children weekly updates about his work. using stories to inspire them. Today I corrected a report my supervisor wrote wrong. Me, a newcomer. See, Evelyn would say, you belong there. By the second month, Toglets extended Daniel's contract and increased his monthly allowance. It wasn't wealth, but it meant they could finally afford 2 mattresses instead of 1, and proper school shoes instead of borrowed pairs. Daniel paid off a debt he had owed in Oron, quietly, gratefully. One Saturday, he took the family out for roasted corn and soft drinks by the roadside. They sat together on low plastic chairs, eating and laughing. It wasn't fancy, but it felt like celebration. Michael looked at his father and asked, "Do you think we'll ever live in a big house?" Daniel smiled at him, corn in hand. "I don't know when, but I know it's possible." "And you'll work there forever?" Amara asked. Daniel hesitated for a second. "As long as I need to. For now, this is where God has placed me." Evelyn watched him as he said it, noticing the flicker in his eyes, the way he scanned the busy road like he was already thinking 5 steps ahead. But she didn't ask questions, not yet. For now, they had peace. And in Lagos, peace was worth more than gold. At exactly 7:30 a.m., Daniel Okon arrived at the gates of Toglex Global every weekday. W-pressed shirt, iron trousers, and a quiet confidence tucked behind his modest smile. He had now been with the company for almost 6 months, and though he started as a junior operations analyst, his hard work ethic spoke louder than his title ever could. Every assignment Daniel touched came back cleaner, clearer, and smarter. He didn't just complete tasks, he solved problems. When the logistics department fell behind on supplier reports, Daniel stayed up half the night cross-checking figures manually. When inventory staff mishandled a shipment, he spotted the error before it became a loss. His supervisor, Mr. Adebayo, took notice. "This man works like 3, he whispered to the department head during a staff meeting, and never asked for praise. Daniel wasn't doing it for praise. He was doing it for his family. Back at home in Ajigonle, Evelyn folded clothes near the window as the children got ready for school. "Mommy," Joy said, "why does Daddy come home so late?" "He's working hard for all of us." "Is he tired?" Evelyn paused. "He's tired, but he's proud." Even though the apartment still had water shortages and unreliable light, things had improved. They now had a small fridge, a used laptop for the children, and a basic gas cooker that didn't smoke up the whole kitchen. Evelyn had even found a way to contribute. She started braiding hair for neighbors at a small fee, sometimes making enough to cover groceries for the week. They were still far from comfortable. But for the first time in years, the future didn't feel like a burden. At work, Daniel's reputation grew. He began sitting in on strategy sessions, not to speak, but to listen. He soaked in every detail about supply chains, vendor negotiations, and procurement policies. When the IT department needed someone to test a new inventory tracking system, Daniel volunteered, taught himself the platform, and trained others. He's not just smart. A colleague once said, "He's relentless." By the end of his first year, Daniel was promoted to Operations Associate, a step up in title and salary. With the raise, he moved his family to a slightly better flat. Still not glamorous, but it had functioning plumbing and a door that didn't creak when the wind blew. On the night they moved in, Evelyn made egusi soup with meat, real meat, and the children cheered like they had won the lottery. "You're spoiling us," Daniel teased as they sat on the floor eating together. "I've been saving," Evelyn said. You work too hard not to come home to something nice. At church, Daniel became known as the quiet achiever. He didn't boast, didn't lead committees, and didn't preach. But when the pastor's generator broke, Daniel fixed it. When the youth needed notebooks, he donated them anonymously. His humility made him memorable. One Sunday, after service, a visiting elder pulled him aside. You're the kind of man people build around, the old man said. Not because you shout, but because you show. Daniel nodded, grateful. At the office, he was eventually assigned to oversee supply coordination between the Lagos branch and two regional warehouses in Warri and Port Harcourt. The trust was significant. Mistakes at that level could cost millions, but Daniel didn't make mistakes. Instead, he found ways to cut delivery delays by 80% and reduce supplier costs through better forecasting. The numbers spoke for themselves. His name began circulating among upper management. One afternoon, while reviewing vendor performance metrics, Mr. Adebayo entered Daniel's cubicle. "Pack your laptop," he said. Daniel blinked. "Sir, you're attending the regional planning meeting this Friday with the Director of African Operations." Daniel stood slowly. "Am I presenting?" "Number you're observing. But trust me, it's only a matter of time." That Friday, Daniel sat at a long boardroom table, flanked by executives in crisp suits and soft leather shoes. He wore his best shirt, his only tie, and carried a worn-out notebook full of handwritten data. The director glanced at him during a discussion about supplier turnover in the Niger Delta. "You," she said, pointing to Daniel, "do you have a different view?" The room went still. Daniel cleared his throat. "Respectfully, ma, I believe the problem isn't the suppliers. It's the contract renewal cycle. It forces mid-year renegotiations, which causes uncertainty. We could pilot a staggered cycle, starting with the Warri region." She stared at him for a moment. Then she smiled. "Who hired this one?" Everyone chuckled, but Daniel wasn't laughing. His hands were sweating under the table. That evening, Mr. Adebayo patted his back. "They'll remember your name now." When Daniel got home that night, Joy was waiting at the door. "Daddy!" she shouted, leaping into his arms. He carried her inside, where Evelyn was serving food and David was chasing a cockroach with a broom. "Today was different," Daniel said as he sat. "How?" Evelyn asked. "They looked at me differently, like I belonged." "You do belong," she said. He paused for a long moment before nodding. "Yes," he said quietly. "I think I do." The email came on a Tuesday morning. Daniel was sitting at his desk, reviewing a logistics report, when his supervisor called him into the conference room. "We've been watching your work for a while," Mr. Adebayo began, placing a printed document in front of him. "The leadership in Houston has too. They're impressed." Daniel sat up straighter. "They're offering you a role at the U.S. headquarters," he continued. "It's not just a promotion, it's a transfer. Relocation package, full sponsorship for you and your family." Daniel blinked. "Sir, I don't even know what to say." "Say yes," Mr. Adebayo smiled. "You've earned it." That evening, Daniel barely ate. He sat staring at his plate until Evelyn finally nudged him. "You didn't even touch your rice," she said. "I got a transfer," he said quietly. "To Port Harcourt?" He shook his head. "Houston, the United States." The room went still. The children stared at him, wide-eyed. "You mean America?" Amara whispered. "Yes." Michael dropped his spoon. "We're all going." Daniel nodded. "They're sponsoring the entire family. Visa, housing, the works." Joy clapped her hands. We'll live in a house with carpet and snow and playgrounds. David looked skeptical. Is this real? It's very real, Daniel said, smiling for the first time that evening. It's happening. Evelyn put her hand over her mouth and exhaled slowly. Everything's about to change, she whispered. The next 2 months were a whirlwind. Interviews at the US Embassy, vaccinations, school withdrawal letters, farewell dinners at church, and long nights of packing and paperwork. Evelyn stayed strong for the children, but privately, she wrestled with anxiety. What if we can't adjust? She asked Daniel one night as they lay in bed. We will, he said, together. She reached for his hand. I'm proud of you. He smiled in the dark. We're doing this for them, for all of us. Their first flight was a blur of flashing seatbelt signs, complimentary juice boxes, and questions. Joy asked, why is the plane so cold? David asked, can we see Nigeria from the clouds? Amara asked, what if they don't like us in America? Daniel wrapped his arms around them all, one question at a time. They landed in Houston in the early morning, stepping into a strange world of clean streets, quiet neighborhoods, and polite smiles that didn't always reach the eyes. A company representative met them at the airport and took them to a furnished apartment arranged by Toglex. It was small but clean, with carpeting and hot water and a kitchen full of food. Still, the silence was heavy. The air felt foreign. The clocks ticked differently. The children started school a week later. Michael was placed in advanced math and science classes. Though intelligent, has struggled with speaking up in class. The accent barrier was real. Amara was teased for her hair at first, her thick afro puffs unfamiliar to the girls in her grade, but she soon found friends who admired her accent and sharp mind. David joined the school soccer team. His speed and footwork turned heads quickly, and Joy, who barely spoke for the first 2 weeks, finally came home one day and said, my teacher smiled at me today. I think she likes me. Evelyn laughed and hugged her tightly. Of course she does. What's not to like? Meanwhile, Daniel dived into his new role at Toglex headquarters. The pressure was high, tight deadlines, new systems, unfamiliar office culture. But he handled it the only way he knew how, by staying humble and working twice as hard. You're sharp, Mr. Ocon, one executive told him during a strategy meeting. And fast. We like that. He smiled politely, nodding. But inside he felt like a child learning to walk all over again. He would come home each night exhausted but proud, and Evelyn would always be waiting at the door with warm food, gentle eyes, and a quiet, unspoken message. We are still us. They weren't rich yet, not by American standards, but they no longer lived in fear of school fees or medical bills. The children were thriving. Their future looked wide and open like the Texas sky. And as they sat together one Sunday evening eating suya they had made at home, Joy asked, Daddy, do you think we'll ever go back to Nigeria? Daniel smiled, his eyes distant. Someday, but not yet. For now, they were exactly where they needed to be, under a new sky, planting new roots, together. The Ocon family had now lived in Houston for nearly 3 years. In that time, Daniel had grown from a curious newcomer into a highly respected logistics specialist at Toglex Global's headquarters. He'd been promoted twice, his salary had improved, and he had quietly built a reputation for efficiency and integrity. The children were thriving. Michael was preparing for college. Amara had won a writing competition. David's soccer team reached state finals. And Joy was painting murals at school that even the teachers photographed. Evelyn had adjusted too. She now volunteered twice a week at a local shelter and sometimes helped organize events at church. On the outside, everything looked perfect, but Daniel was restless. He sat at his desk late one evening after the family had gone to bed. He stared at the glow of his laptop screen, reviewing data on local oil contractors in Nigeria, reports, trends, import gaps, missed opportunities. A voice inside him kept whispering, "You've helped build someone else's empire. What about your own?" He leaned back in his chair, the numbers blurring in his tired eyes. He had saved. Over the past 3 years, he had put money aside bit by bit, cutting personal luxuries and quietly stacking resources. His savings weren't enough to drill a well, but enough to start small. Maybe logistics, maybe procurement. Something. He had the industry knowledge now, and more importantly, the hunger. The next morning over breakfast, Daniel cleared his throat. "I've been thinking about something." Evelyn looked up from her cup of tea. "About what?" He hesitated, glancing at the children. "Maybe I'll tell you when we are alone." Amara raised an eyebrow. "That means it's serious." Later that evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Daniel finally spoke. "I want to start something back home," he said slowly. "A company, something in the oil sector." Evelyn blinked. "You mean a side hustle?" "Number, I mean a real business." She said nothing for a moment. Then, "You want to leave your job?" "Not yet," he replied. "But I want to begin laying the groundwork. I've saved enough to take a trip. Look around, talk to people, register something." Evelyn folded her arms. "We just found balance here." "I know, and this wouldn't change that for now. But this dream, it's been growing in me. Every time I sit in those boardrooms, I wonder, what if we owned a seat at the table?" Evelyn looked down, fingers curled around her tea mug. "We've built so much here. The children are settled. I finally feel still." Daniel reached across the table. "I'm not trying to uproot us. I just want to start planting seeds. Quietly." She nodded slowly. "Then plant them wisely." Daniel booked his first trip to Nigeria in the spring. 3 weeks. He called it a research trip to everyone who asked. He landed in Lagos with mixed emotions. The smells, the sounds, the pulse of the city. It felt like returning to a place he knew in his bones, but hadn't touched in years. He stayed with a cousin in Lekki, rented a small car, and began visiting government offices, consulting firms, and industrial zones. He attended 2 local oil expos and met 3 former Toglex colleagues who had started modest businesses of their own. The air buzzed with opportunity, but also red tape, licensing, partnerships, land issues, taxes, political favors. Still, Daniel didn't flinch. He opened a business account, registered a company name, Okon Energy Resources Limited. By the end of the trip, he had secured initial consultations with a procurement advisor, a legal team, and a local logistics coordinator. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Back in Houston, Evelyn asked how it went. Daniel's eyes sparkled. "Better than I hoped, harder than I imagined." The children were less interested in oil talk. Michael asked, "Did you bring plantain chips?" Amara added, "And chin chin?" He laughed. Yes, I brought everything." As he handed out the snacks, Evelyn pulled him aside and whispered, "What's next?" He looked at her seriously. "I'll keep working at Toglex for now, but I'll take 1 trip a year, slow and steady." She studied him. "You're already gone, aren't you?" "I'm right here," he said. "But a part of me, yes, it's chasing something." Evelyn nodded. "Then chase it. Just promise you'll always find your way back." He kissed her forehead. "Always." Daniel's next trip to Nigeria came 6 months later. It was meant to be 3 weeks. It stretched into 6. Things are moving faster than expected, he told Evelyn over the phone one night. I found a small warehouse near Eleme. We can use it as a temporary base for storage and dispatch. Evelyn sat on their bed in Houston, nodding, even though he couldn't see her. And the permits? In progress. The lawyer says we'll have a business license for logistics by month end. I've hired a local operations coordinator to help me manage things while I'm away. You're not even away yet, she murmured. There was a pause. Then Daniel said gently, I'll be home soon. The children adjusted quickly to his absence. They had seen him travel before, for work conferences or trainings. But something felt different now. Did Daddy say when he's coming back? Joy asked one evening as Evelyn braided her hair. Soon, Evelyn replied, even though she wasn't sure anymore. Michael was in his first year of pre-med. He buried himself in books and part-time lab work. Amara had joined the school's leadership council and started writing for the local Nigerian American youth newsletter. David was training for a regional soccer scholarship. They were growing, striving, becoming the very future Daniel had worked so hard for. But the gap he left behind was starting to widen. In Nigeria, Daniel was thriving. The moment his boots touched the oil-rich soil of Port Harcourt, he came alive. There was something about the chaotic ambition of Nigeria that matched his own rhythm. The noise, the hustle, the tension, it energized him. His cousin Tobe introduced him to a local procurement manager who, impressed by Daniel's corporate background, agreed to include Okon Energy Resources on a shortlist for minor contract bids. It's small, fuel supplied to one of the depots, the man said. But if you deliver well, you'll be invited again. Daniel smiled. That's all I need, a foot in the door. He spent his days negotiating prices, inspecting trucks, visiting offices, and standing in lines at government agencies. He attended networking dinners and learned the unspoken rules of Nigeria's oil game, who to trust, who to avoid, how much to tip the middlemen who move paperwork faster. He was no longer just dreaming, he was bidding. Back in Houston, Evelyn kept the house running. She paid bills, helped with assignments, checked resumes, and managed household tensions that only seemed to come up when Daniel was away. He said he was coming last week. Joy pouted one night. But he didn't. Something came up, Evelyn said softly. You always say that. Michael pulled her aside later that night. Mom, when is he coming back? Be honest. Evelyn sighed. I don't know. He says he's close to landing something big. He's just trying to secure the business first. Michael looked away. We've done everything right. Isn't that enough? Why does he need more? Evelyn couldn't answer. Daniel finally returned after 2 months. Thinner and more tanned, but glowing with pride. He brought gifts, fabric for Evelyn, handmade jewelry for Amara and Joy, a custom bowl for David, and a sleek digital watch for Michael. I missed you all, he said. The children hugged him. But it wasn't like before. Their embrace was polite, measured, not cold, but careful. Only Evelyn held him longer than usual. Later that night, while unpacking his bags, he showed her the business cards, receipts, and a signed letter of intent for a small but official contract. They trust me, Evelyn. They see me as serious. Next trip, I want to start leasing trucks. I'll go again next quarter. She folded his shirt slowly. So this is it now. You'll be living there half the time. Number just for now, until the foundation is set. She stared at him. That foundation feels like a wall sometimes. Daniel looked at her, guilt flickering in his eyes. I'm doing this for all of us. I know, she said quietly. but the us you're doing it for is changing every time you go. 2 weeks later, he flew back again, and this time, he stayed even longer. Okon Energy Resources secured its first contract and delivered efficiently. The client was pleased. More calls followed, more meetings. Daniel began hiring 2 full-time staff. He leased a second-hand truck. The business was small, but real, functional, growing. He sent money home every month, school fees, groceries, rent. But the phone calls became shorter. Sometimes he forgot birthdays. He missed David's championship game and Amara's awards dinner. Dad said he'll call tonight, Joy said, holding her tablet, eyes on the screen. He didn't. Back in Nigeria, Daniel stood outside the warehouse one evening, hands on his hips, sweat on his brow. Toby walked up beside him. "You've built something strong, cousin." Daniel smiled. "Not strong yet, but I can feel it coming." Toby nodded. "Just don't let what you build replace who you are." Daniel said nothing, but the words stayed with him. Daniel didn't remember exactly when she first caught his eye. It may have been the morning she arrived at the Port Harcourt Business Center with 3 little children in tow, one strapped to her back, another clinging to her hand, and the third running ahead barefoot. Or maybe it was the moment she raised her voice, clear, commanding, arguing with a rude security guard who had tried to push her to the back of the queue. "She's fire," Tob had whispered with a smirk. "You like that type." Daniel had laughed it off then, but he didn't forget her face. Her name was Bianca Adegoke. She ran a small boutique in GRA and had recently opened a new branch in the oil mill market. Their paths crossed again at a local supplier's networking event. She was wearing a flowing green dress and gold bangles that jingled when she laughed. "You're Mr. Okon, right?" she said, smiling. "Yes, Daniel. You're the one everyone says came from America and opened a logistics company." He chuckled, flattered. "People talk too much." "And you're humble," she teased. Dangerous combination. They spoke briefly, nothing serious, but something about her stayed in Daniel's mind. Over the next few weeks, they saw each other more often, at business mixers, church fundraisers, and one particularly long evening at the customs office, where both were waiting on delayed paperwork. She was warm, charming, confident. Unlike Evelyn, who was rooted, calm, and quiet, Bianca was unpredictable, bold, loud in all the places life had taught Daniel to whisper. She reminded him of who he used to be before responsibility hardened his edges. He learned she had 3 children from a previous relationship, all under 10. "Do you have family?" she asked one evening over lunch. "I do," he said slowly. "Wife and 4 kids in Houston." She nodded, unfazed. "Must be hard, living apart." "It is." Silence. Then she looked at him and said, "Sometimes, even when people are together, they still feel alone." He didn't answer, but her words sank like a stone in his chest. Back in Houston, Evelyn began to sense it. The phone calls came later. The tone was shorter. Daniel had always been a man of few words, but now even the silence felt distant. "Do you talk to Dad?" Amara asked one evening. "I tried," Evelyn said. "He said he was in a meeting." Joy looked up. Again, Michael didn't say much anymore, but he listened carefully. In Nigeria, Daniel started visiting Bianca's boutique under the guise of business. She asked him to advise her on inventory systems. He offered to help. She made him tea. He started staying longer. She once invited him to dinner with her kids. They greeted him as Uncle Daniel, their faces bright with innocence and affection. It made him ache in a way he couldn't explain. He sent less money home that month. One evening, as he sat across from Bianca on her balcony, she said, "You're always carrying the world on your shoulders." "Why?" "Because no one else will," he replied. She leaned in, her voice softer. "You deserve joy too." He looked at her, and for the first time in years, he believed it. In Houston, Evelyn stayed up late scrolling through old messages. There were no new ones from Daniel. She checked their bank account. The monthly transfer was short. No explanation. She didn't ask. She just took on extra shifts at the shelter and called a neighbor to help with repairs. "I'll handle it," she said. And she did. Back in Nigeria, Daniel crossed the line he didn't plan to. It started with late-night calls and dinner invitations. Then one night, it didn't end. He stayed. He slept over. And the next morning, as Bianca made breakfast while her children ran around the house, calling him Uncle Danny, something in him shifted. He didn't feel guilty. He felt wanted. Weeks passed. He bought Bianca a new phone, paid her rent ahead, sent her youngest to a private creche. Bianca didn't ask. She simply smiled and said, "Thank you." Daniel told himself it wasn't betrayal. It was helping someone who needed him. He was giving, providing, just like he always had. Only now, it was to someone new. Meanwhile, Evelyn was giving too. Giving up sleep to drive the kids to school. Giving up rest to work weekends. Giving up tears to protect her children from worry. But no one saw. No one said, "Thank you." No one asked if she was okay. Daniel returned home for a short visit. 2 months later, he was distant, distracted. "Are you okay?" Evelyn asked. "I'm tired," he said. "The business is demanding." She nodded, but her heart knew better. She didn't cry, she didn't argue. She just said, "Your daughters miss you," and walked away. The first missed transfer came in February. It wasn't completely absent, just short, by nearly $1,000. Evelyn checked the bank statement twice, then a third time. Then she sat at the edge of the bed in their Houston apartment, clutching the phone in her hand, staring at Daniel's name on the screen. She didn't call. Instead, she waited, hoping he would explain. That night came and went. No call. The following week, Evelyn used the savings meant for Amara's school trip to cover rent. She told the children it had been postponed. Amara didn't believe her, but she didn't ask questions. Michael offered to cut back on his campus meal plan. David stopped asking for new cleats. Joy sat quietly in her room one evening, drawing a picture of their family. This time she only colored in 5 people. Evelyn stared at it for a long time before saying, "Where's Daddy?" Joy shrugged. "He's busy." In Nigeria, Daniel was busy. Okon Energy Resources had landed its second contract, fuel delivery for a marine services company. He had hired more staff, leased another truck, and opened a small office in Port Harcourt. Bianca's boutique had expanded. She now had 3 apprentices and a driver for school runs. Daniel had helped with every step, sending money, offering advice, attending openings. He told himself it was temporary, that he would return home once the company was stable. But the truth was, he liked the world he'd built around Bianca. It was lighter, simpler. No school runs, no bills from 2 countries, no teenage mood swings or questions about bank statements. Just admiration, softness, ease. Evelyn finally called. "Daniel." His voice was groggy. "Evie, is everything okay?" "The transfer this month. I know, business was tight. We had unexpected expenses on our delivery. I'll send the balance next week." "It's been 2 weeks." "I said I'll send it." Silence. She spoke quietly. Michael couldn't register for 2 of his classes. He had to defer them. Daniel sighed. "Why didn't he tell me directly?" "Because he doesn't know how to talk to a ghost." That stung, but he said nothing. Evelyn hung up without saying goodbye. Later that night, Evelyn sat on the porch outside their apartment, wrapped in a shawl. The air was still, the sky silent. Michael joined her. "Do you want me to get a second job?" he asked. She looked at him, alarmed. "Number, you're already doing too much." "So are you," he said softly. They didn't speak for a while. Then Michael whispered, "I think he's with someone else." Evelyn turned her face slowly. "I overheard Joy crying the other night. She was talking to Amara. She said Dad is smiling in someone else's pictures." On Instagram, Evelyn closed her eyes. In Port Harcourt, Daniel sat across from Bianca at a quiet lounge. She sipped her cocktail and leaned in. "The boutique needs a bigger space. I saw a spot in Transamadi. We'll need a few million naira for the lease." Daniel ran his hand over his face. "That's a lot right now." "You said you'd always support me," she said, her voice light but pressing. "I'm supporting a lot of people." "Well, you're not married to all of them," she said, half joking. He looked away. The next month, the transfer didn't come at all. Evelyn borrowed from a friend at church. The month after that, she picked up extra shifts at a shelter and cleaned offices on weekends. Still, the power got disconnected for 3 days. Joy developed a fever and couldn't go to the clinic until Evelyn borrowed money again. One evening, Amara broke down in the kitchen. "Why is he doing this to us?" Evelyn held her daughter tightly. "Because sometimes people lose themselves in places they were never meant to stay." David scored the winning goal at his school's final match. He looked to the bleachers. Only Evelyn was there, clapping through tears. In Nigeria, Daniel was attending a gala with Bianca. He wore a black tailored suit. She wore a sequin dress and diamonds he bought her. They smiled for cameras, laughed for strangers. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He didn't check it. Later, alone in the car, he opened the message. "Your daughter was admitted this morning. High fever. Couldn't afford clinic. I've taken care of it, in case you were wondering." "Evelyn." He sat in the silence of the car, heart thudding. He didn't reply. Not that night, not the next day. Back in Houston, Evelyn sat with Joy curled on her lap. "You okay now?" she asked. Joy nodded. "Mommy?" "Yes, love." "Do you think Daddy still loves us?" Evelyn looked down at her daughter's fragile face. And she did something she hadn't done in weeks. She cried. Softly, silently. Evelyn rose before the sun. Every morning started the same. Boil water, pack leftovers into containers, iron school uniforms, and sit in quiet prayer before waking the children. There were no new messages from Daniel, but she had long stopped waiting for his name to light up her phone. Instead, she focused on what remained. 4 children who still believed in her, even when their world was unraveling. Michael was working 2 part-time jobs, one at the university science lab, the other tutoring high school students on weekends. He barely slept, yet still maintained top grades. One evening, he came home to find Evelyn dozing off at the kitchen table, calculator in hand, and unpaid bills spread before her. He covered her with a shawl and began reviewing the numbers himself. The next morning, he opened a spreadsheet and started a budget for the family. "We'll manage, Mom," he said. "We always do." Amara launched a GoFundMe page for a writing program she'd been accepted into. Her pitch was raw and real. "My dad was our provider until he wasn't. My mom never left, never quit, and never asked for help. So I will." The campaign raised enough in 2 weeks to cover tuition and books. Her English teacher called her the most quietly powerful student I've ever taught. David trained harder than ever. One evening, After his team won a district match, a scout pulled him aside. "We're watching you, son," the man said. "Keep this up and scholarships will follow." David smiled but said nothing. He didn't want praise. He wanted his father in the stands. Joy stopped asking about her dad altogether. Instead, she began drawing her family with a woman in the middle, holding a house over her head like a roof. Beneath her, 4 children stood smiling. "No, Daddy?" Evelyn asked gently one day. Joy shrugged. "We're not missing anything." Evelyn stared at the picture for a long time before placing it on the fridge. Despite everything, they were surviving. No, they were thriving. Not because it was easy, but because Evelyn refused to let hardship define her family. She learned to stretch meals, fix plumbing with YouTube videos, and patch shoes with needle and thread. When the car broke down, she walked to the children's schools in the cold. When she couldn't afford all the books, she photocopied from the library and shared 1 copy between 3 of them. And somehow, through all the chaos, she still found time to smile. One Sunday, a neighbor knocked on their door with 2 grocery bags. "We've seen how hard you're working," the woman said. "Take this. No need to say thank you." Evelyn's lips trembled. "You don't know what this means." "Oh, we do," the woman replied. "We've been there too." Back in Nigeria, Daniel sat in a hotel lounge, sipping champagne beside Bianca, her head resting on his shoulder. He had just received news that his company won another small contract, delivery support for a rig site in Bayelsa. "I told you, baby," Bianca smiled, stroking his hand. "You're a king." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That night, he stood on the hotel balcony, staring into the darkness, his phone heavy in his palm. He opened the group chat with Evelyn and the kids. There were dozens of unread messages, photos from Joy's art show, a short video of Davy's winning goal, Michael's acceptance letter into a pre-med honors program, Amara's article published in a youth magazine. He didn't press play. He just scrolled and scrolled and scrolled. Then he shut off the screen. The next week, Evelyn received an envelope from the college Michael attended. It was a handwritten note. "Your son is exceptional. Not just in academics, but in character. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. The world needs more people like him." She read it twice, then called Michael into the room and hugged him for a full minute without saying a word. "I'm okay, Mom," he whispered. "I promise." "I know," she replied, "but you shouldn't have to be." One afternoon, as Evelyn scrubbed floors at the shelter where she volunteered, the supervisor pulled her aside. "We're opening up a part-time staff position. Pays better, fewer hours. You've more than earned it." Evelyn's eyes welled up. "Thank you." She accepted the offer, not just for the money, but for the dignity. The children planned a surprise for her birthday. A homemade dinner, handwritten notes, and a small cake from the bakery Amara worked at on Saturdays. When she walked in and saw the candles flickering in their living room, she froze. "We love you, Mommy," Joy said, lifting a handmade card that read, "Our forever hero." Evelyn sat at the table and cried, not because she was sad, but because she had been reminded they were still a family, incomplete, bruised, but not broken. And miles away, across the ocean, Daniel Okon, once the foundation of their lives, was beginning to feel something he had long suppressed: regret. Dear viewers, what lessons did you take away from this dramatic tale? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, give us a thumbs up, share it with friends, and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so that you never miss out on our latest tales. Thank you for watching and be blessed.